and communicating with Nick, Alex, or
Nick.
I haven't looked too stupid.
It says we're live now on my screen. Just an FYI to everyone. It says we're live now on my.
Yes,
screen.
Lisa, we're live.
Now,
Just an FYI to everyone.
Okay, we're, the commissioners are sitting at the
We're
boards.
live now on my.
Yes, Lisa, we're live. Oh,
it's doing that right now.
Just an FYI to everyone.
okay, we're, the commissioners are sitting at the
We're
boards.
live now on my.
Yes, Lisa, we're live. Oh,
Just an FYI to everyone.
okay, we're, the commissioners are sitting at the boards.
So you need to
Yes, Lisa, we're live.
kill the YouTube sound.
This one.
Kill the YouTube sound.
There we go.
Well, I don't know if it's now on.
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so the commissioners are sitting at the trustee seats, just in order to have a live conversation tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Jenny to start the meeting.
Welcome, everybody. Can you hear me? No? Yes? I do. Press the thing. Oh. I'm not doing something. Can anyone hear? Can you guys hear me? Okay. Welcome. Welcome to our August meeting of the Sustainable Environmental Advisory Commission. The first item on our agenda is an approval of the July meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes from July meeting?
I'll move to approve.
Second? All right, all those in favor? Unless there are any corrections, changes?
All right.
Okay, next item up on our agenda is a presentation on recycling in the village by Josh Connell, who is of Lakeshore Recycling. And I will turn over.
Good evening, everyone. And I apologize. I thought I might have a PowerPoint because I didn't realize how many people might be online versus in person. But I'm also hoping this will be somewhat of a fluid conversation about recycling. I did have a couple questions posed to me that I'll start with here. The first question was in regards to curbside recycling. Currently, there seems to be seems complex in regards to participants understanding what materials are accepted or not. Is there value in simplifying the stream? And then there's an example here. Would it be better off not to have plastics in the curbside stream? As a related example, the village's recent spring greening event was limited to only paper shredding and electronics. It seemed like a much more effective event. My simple answer, yes, simplification is fantastic. A couple years ago, I sat on the Illinois Recycling Task Force. This was made up by municipalities throughout the state of Illinois and other stakeholders, other waste haulers as well. And we came up with recycling guidelines for single stream residential recycling. And I've got a couple examples with me that I will at least have a couple people here that are in the audience share. Maybe keep one to share and give out the other. So obviously education is always the most important thing that we can do. And simplification does work. So when we had the advice of a consulting firm on a national level with recycling, some of the things that we wanted to do was just keep it simple. And so this is a new set of guidelines that we put on all of our new contracts and on the lid of the recycling cart, just to keep it as simple as possible. If it's not on that list, we don't want to recycle it. And then what we do is we kind of give some of the big no items. You know, the no items are generally tanglers and common items that people will throw in the recycling that we try to capture with the education to keep that out of the waste stream. One thing that I will say in person in the group, but I'll never put this on paper, is pizza boxes. You know, that's an item that as long as it's clean, you could recycle the pizza box. But you're going to see a lot of education where they'll say pizza boxes are a no-no because you open up the floodgates and say it's acceptable. You'll get a pizza box filled with grease and cheese, and people say, well, it's on the list, so put it in the recycling. So it's amazing the things that we've seen over time. This new list makes it simple. I could get you guys a copy of this list. This is the same list that the Solid Waste Agency of Northern Cook County is using, and every municipality throughout the state of Illinois is going to start using this list if they haven't already. Okay. Now, to backtrack a little bit, our facility, we've got a state-of-the-art facility that we built in 2016. In 2018, because of the commodity prices dropping, we made another a few $1 million investment in robotics and additional optic sorters to sort material. So we can accept items that aren't typical in most single stream recycling programs. But again, in an effort to simplify it, make it easy for residents and the consumer to understand what's acceptable, you know, we've got this new list. But some of the items that we do accept that aren't typical would be some of your rigid plastics, some of your, you know, rigid polystyrenes, like it could be a milk crate, or sometimes kids' toys that are all a rigid polystyrene. Those are items that we could take. There's also some, you know, metals that are more in a construction and demolition recycling program that as long as it fits in your cart, we'll take it, we'll sort it. Our facility is right next door to a construction and demolition recycling facility that we own and process material at. So it makes our processing a little bit easier and our ability to accept some odd items a little bit easier in any program. The second question that was posed to me was, would curbside recycling see greater participation of the materials accepted or simplified? Kind of like question number one. And rather than adding additional materials to that stream, there were more drop-off opportunities for some of the items that may be causing some of the confusion and lack of participation. Years ago, I would have said I love the idea of a drop-off item, but working with Public Works in other communities, it just opens itself up to a nightmare. Unless you police it and have people watching those drop-off containers, you end up with everything in that container. You end up with significant illegal dumping, where you know, contractors and construction material ends up in there, and all sorts of items that aren't always coming from the public, or at least from the community. It might be coming from outside of the community, and the drop-offs are really, really difficult. I wouldn't recommend that. Now, when you go back to the first question with the spring greening event, I've been there a few times over the last several years. You know, the idea of maybe adding some odd items that residents might have to that list with the paper shredding and electronics. I know as a company, we'd be happy to have an open top box there as part of an event like that to maybe take some of those odd items that residents have that can be recyclable. So I think in that kind of environment where it's limited to one day, so many hours, it could work, but at an ongoing basis, it can be tough.
Do you have an example of some of the things that you're thinking of? I'm just trying to think of the kind of things that normally people are recycling are things that you're not storing for a long period of time, whereas things that you bring to spring greening are things that you can keep in your garage for.
Yeah, and so where we've had some success is some like large construction items, whether it's wood crates, pallets, empty paint cans, things like that people may be storing in their garage or basement, where we could collect it in one container and sort it at our construction and demolition recycling facility. Textiles, but I know Skokie has a nice textile program, but sometimes even opening that up to a spring, you know, greening event like this encourages more textile recycling, or at least awareness, just by people realizing, oh, I didn't realize we could even do this in our community on an ongoing basis. But sometimes just having a container there for textiles can be helpful. More for the education than anything, though. So Third question here is just to provide some insight into the recycling markets and how they vary or are impacted by the region in this country. I tell you what, we've been on a roller coaster with recycling commodity rates. Fortunately, because LRS possesses a newer facility, we've had no issues finding markets for the material that we collect in Skokie, which is great. I've read stories of all sorts of recycling that just ends up in the landfill because they can't find a home for the material over the last few years. The markets just absolutely plummeted a few years ago. China stopped purchasing most of our recyclables to the point it became 100% weren't going to China, or if they were going backdoor, and it became really challenging. We saw what was a positive environment for recycling economically became a negative environment. Fortunately, things have turned around a little bit. We expected that it wouldn't be forever, and it's improved. We're not to the point where we were a few years ago. And our processing costs have gone up too, because we have to make sure that the material we do collect is extremely clean so that we can continue to have good relationships with the mills and the buyers that are out there. But the markets have definitely improved. I think potentially it could be a short-term issue because of some of the supply chain issues. But like I was saying earlier, before the meeting started, Skokie's got a resident expert in Bob Render that's sitting on the board here. And he is probably a plastics expert throughout the country. And so, that's one piece of the stream, but it's a big part of the single stream recycling stream that we want to keep plastic bottles and plastic material in there. But Bob, do you have an opinion on where the markets are going from your perspective, at least on the plastic?
Well, certainly for PET and HDPE, they're extremely elevated. After that, if you're able to extract polypropylene, also very high. Residual bales, 3 to 7 bales, are spotty. It just depends on where you are in the country and also whether you pull number 5s out of your 3s or not. Whether you are pulling PET thermoforms out and putting them in 1 bales.
And explain what number 5s are so people understand what polypropylene.
It's like yogurt cups and
Yep.
Takeout containers.
Tubs. Yep.
And so I think it is definitely regional. I would say the northeast part of the country probably has the highest pricing because of mature demand and where mills are. So the prices are never been higher in some ways, but I'm sure that it comes at a cost in terms of additional processing and freight costs are out of sight. So, if you've ever been to a MRF, there's not a lot of room, and it's like a shark. You got to keep eating, so you've got to keep shipping. So you have to take what you can because so that's sort of my perspective on that. Are you making MRP bells?
No.
Mixed rigids?
Mixed rigids, yes.
Okay, MRP mixed rigid or bulky rigids. So even though prices are up, and those are like your laundry baskets or
Crates,
toys,
yeah.
whatever, and related to what you're allowed to put in there and what the rule is also pretty good. Couple things. One is that there's just a demand for post-consumer materials now that I don't think is going to go away. And also just very high resin prices right now, which are caused amazingly by the fact that you will see this in stores today. There's the shipping containers to bring materials to the United States have tripled or quadrupled or quintupled in cost. And the way resin prices were always moderated was by imports. It's not cheaper to bring imports in because of freight costs. So right now, the United States is sort of an island when it comes to resin prices. And also because we can't really ship out, there's no containers coming here, or it's very
Or they're going out empty.
There's not a lot going out.
Yeah.
So it's a really unusual confluence of things. High demand, no export into moderate prices. And but we think it's gonna start leveling off soon. But every time we predict that something else happens, like a hurricane or floods, and then there's disruptions, and prices seem to stay where they are.
And it's my opinion, and it's just my opinion, but that the issues we're having at the ports has created some temporary elevated pricing. Because, I mean, and CBS just did a story on this Sunday on how, because of COVID, they've had some ships come in, they'll unload the overseas container, they won't take anything with them because they've got a COVID case or 2 or 3 or 10 on the boat, and the boat will leave without any overseas containers going back. And so some of those problems I would hope are temporary. And some of the shipping problems that we have are temporary, especially with the cost of shipping right now being at an all-time high. We've never seen the cost to move material, and even locally too. When we talk about moving bales of material, a lot of our fiber, paper, and cardboard is going up to Green Bay. Just the cost to get it to Green Bay today versus last year has tripled because we're just out of truck drivers. It's really putting a strain on the positive effects that we're seeing on the commodities. But again, is that why the commodities are up? Is because of some of these other issues? I don't know. So it'll be interesting over the next 6 months to kind of see how it plays out. But definitely an interesting time. And then with plastics, and Bob, tell me if I'm wrong, but when you see oil prices spike, you generally see plastics go up too in cost.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's less coupling between oil prices and plastic than there used to, because most plastics are made from natural gas. So natural gas prices are. So that's more of an impact, I think, now on ethylene and propylene. Another reason propylene prices are high is because we've been driving less, and one of the main additives to make polypropylene is a byproduct of making gasoline. So when there's less gasoline, there's less PGP, and polypropylene prices go up. There's other ways of making PGP, but a lot of those are overseas. So it's just a very complex confluence of events that are causing what's going on. I have a question. So way back when, recycling was typically on a share basis of revenue. Then when the prices dropped, to keep programs going, most towns went to a pickup system. We paid for pickup. So we have a long-term trend of higher prices. You ever see contracts that might go back to some revenue share?
I don't think the industry will. Knowing the industry the way I do, I've been in this industry for over 25 years now. But I think with our company, I think we will if communities want to share on the downside too. Most want to have a zero floor on the downside, and I get that. It makes it easier for budget purposes and for protecting the cost, or just have a much higher threshold for sharing of commodities if they do get back to where they were 5 years ago. I know we're open-minded about it though, but I don't think the industry will. And this stuff's out there. If you read you could read some of the large waste and recycling companies' annual reports, and they talk about recycling and revenue share and what their plans are going forward. There won't be any revenue share that I could see on a broad basis. All it takes is one big downturn to scare the heck out of everybody. And that's another issue that we have, in this market, being in the Chicagoland area, is, we have very low cost of disposal in the Midwest. When you go to the East and West Coast, it's $100 to $200 a ton to get rid of garbage. Where on average here in the Chicago market, it's $50 to $55 a ton to get rid of garbage. And so that pricing effect on the waste stream makes recycling that much more challenging to get people to buy in, especially not necessarily residents, but definitely businesses and other consumers. And it makes it tougher for the infrastructure in this market as well. I mean, one of the reasons for my company's success has been our ability to build out infrastructure. Not that Waste Management and Republic, which are the two largest waste haulers in the country, they can't, they could certainly do it, they don't want to do it in Chicago. They want to do it where on the east and west coast where legislation is forcing them to do it, or they've got really high disposal costs to contend with. Like other companies, they're restricted on the capital that they can spend. And so it kind of just allowed us being, locally owned with offices right next door in Morton Grove to kind of build out recycling infrastructure so that we could, have a more robust recycling economy here. But it is tough in the Midwest, definitely tough.
Can I ask you a quick question about the revenue share and that kind of thing? So, for example, Skokie's contract with LRS. Does Skokie pay a fee for the pickup of the recycling, or is there some sort of, accounting for the revenue that's generated from the material?
Do you mind if I answer this? Skokie's always had a fee for the collection, but we had a rebate formula that paid Skokie a percent of the proceeds with a floor of $5 a ton. So no matter what happened over the last few years, Skokie was getting $5 a ton. So good for Skokie and its residents, bad for LRS over the last couple of years. The first couple of years it was good, but we did a 1-year extension to see what the markets do. So far they're turning out in Skokie's favor, that they've improved significantly. Even from 5 months ago, they've improved significantly, especially this month. This month we saw a jump like we've never seen before. But again, is it temporary? Is it not? But the timing is good for the area with anyone having contracts coming up versus having contracts that ended over the last year or so.
Okay. So my other question is, you were talking to Bob about the various plastics. Immediately I got lost, right? So,
Bob can do that
Sorry
too.
about that.
No, that's okay. And I think that's it. I think that gets into the complexity issue. Like, what plastics can be recycled? When can they be recycled? And then environment changes. And so the question I was asking when Max asked me, and you read it off about simplifying, is there another way to structure deliver the service so that it encourages participation for some basics, and then there's some alternatives for some of the things where there's some variability or unpredictability in the what the market is, or whether how feasible it is or how easy it is. Or is there another way to sort of structure the act of recycling so that it's a lot simpler, so it encourages participation?
Well, what I would encourage Skokie to do, maybe with any publication that goes out in the near future, is get this new Illinois recycling task force guidelines out to people so they can see it. It makes it really simple. If it's not on that list, don't recycle it. People are still going to throw some other items in there. Good chance we may recycle some of it, we may not on others, but it will help to increase education on recycling, get more people cognizant of what they're throwing in, and maybe they end up throwing more stuff in the recycling bin because they take the time to rinse out an item or go an extra effort. So we have found, even when you simplify it, we have found that when we've measured it, that we actually increased recycling in an area just because of the education, because a lot of those items were ending up in the garbage and there was contaminants going in the recycling. And so then what we did is we ended up lowering the percentage of contaminants, and we increased the volume because we were taking items that people were throwing away in the garbage because they were cognizant of it just from some education and information. The other thing that I think that we can maybe accomplish is, last I heard there was 27 languages in Skokie. I don't know if that's still true. Might be more. So, do we find a way to maybe, identify some of the large populations in Skokie and maybe put something out in some other languages as well? That could help on the education front as well. So.
Can I ask a question about, so this is about outreach. I'm wondering if are there numbers associated with, when you're recycling, this is your impact on the environment? Like this is why it's better to recycle versus garbage. And so there's obviously a financial impact, both, to the consumer and to the company and also to the village. And then there's also an environmental impact, right? That this is going to stay You know, this is how long it's going to take to decompose. And then if you recycle it, this is, you know, this is what the impact is going to be. And then there's also a number associated with that, right? So the environmental impact, the cost, like the actual dollar cost of the environmental impact is not negligible. And so I'm wondering if you have that data available, like if you have those numbers available in a way that we could communicate.
Good question, Emily. Yeah, we have some data that we could provide that just says, hey, when you recycle X amount of pounds of this material, plastic or paper, this is what we're saving, whether it's X amount of trees or the environmental impact that certain plastics have on the environment. We can grab some of that data and get it to your group here.
I mean, I wonder if we could even reduce it even more. I mean, I know I'm asking for a lot, but like, you know, if you're throwing out like a soda can, like if you reduce it down to something that residents can actually really grasp and say like, okay, actually this is costing this much. Like my mistake is costing this much. Every time I do this, it's 37 cents. Or every time I do this, it's, you know, $1.03. And maybe that's something that, you know, will contribute to it too, to sort of put things into perspective.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It helps people think about it and make decisions then accordingly.
So Emily, the formula that Josh is referring to is a EPA-based formula that's been used for a long time, usually in our business. And it does translate into savings of electricity, water, emissions, and those numbers are calibrated by the EPA. So that's a pretty standard measurement. However, you know, to do a true life cycle analysis, would require pretty extensive study, which I hope someone does, you know, so that you can really answer the question. Because if you put recyclable in the trash, it's a missed opportunity. It adds to the environmental impact you have by going to the landfill versus recycling. So I'm not aware anywhere in my circles where LCAs are being done on that specifically. They're done on recycling processes. We do them, my company does them, so that, you know, to compare, say, if you took a milk jug, process that, and turn that into plastic lumber or another bottle, compared to virgin plastic. That those kinds of waste analysis are done. Yeah. So,
Okay. Yeah, I'm just wondering, you know, how we can get creative, even if, you know, as you were saying, you have it by the pound. Is there a way that we can reduce that into, you know, a tangible amount that, because, you know, I don't know what a pound of plastic looks like, or like what a pound of recyclables looks like. I have no idea, you know, and of course it's going to be different based on what kind of material it is. But, you know, if you tell me like, oh, every time you make a mistake, you know, with whatever, this is the impact, I think that's really tangible.
Well, it's a lot less than it used to be. I could tell you that. With light weighting, you know, I mean, your average water bottle, 16-ounce water bottle, is a lot less weight than it was 10 years ago. So same with your aluminum cans are significantly lighter than they were years ago. So the the manufacturers of these products have done a really good job of making their products without as much aluminum and plastic and all the other things around it as well, which is good for the environment. I know as a company, we work with the Closed Loop organization, and they've done a good job of bringing in all the stakeholders, like Procter & Gamble and Coca-Cola and all the other bottlers, with some of the waste haulers nationally, to talk about ways to improve consumer products, so that we can reduce some of the single-use products that are out there right now, and some of the packaging. I don't know if this idea came out of it, but we struggle with it. That's why I brought this as an example. This is a Amazon Prime flexible plastic packaging. Because it's two-dimensional, when it ends up in the recycling, this gets sorted with our paper, which is not good. So we're struggling with this. Could we recycle it? Yeah, it's a recyclable item, but because of the form it's in, every single stream recycling facility will struggle with this. We could spend dollars, and significant dollars, probably $1 million+ to have an optic sorter grab it. The problem is it makes up less than 1% of the recycle stream. So it's just not cost effective to do that at this point. But this is some of the education that is helpful. I mean, it's not killing any programs, But as you see it more common now, now this replaced what used to be a small box. Now the box is recyclable, but so wasteful. So that, this might be a better outcome for Amazon and for consumers in general, but we're still struggling. Now we could still recycle. We probably recycle a small portion of these by hand, but that's really the only way we can do it is pulling these out of the stream. So, and if this group ever wanted a tour of our facility, I'd be glad to coordinate that, post COVID or at some point when it's safe.
You're talking about those replacing boxes and the boxes being more wasteful to produce. But if the boxes can be recycled, then if we're looking at life cycle analysis, or I don't know if that's done for something like if that's done for this, but if you're transitioning to a product that can't be recycled, is that still more?
It's a good question. I mean, again, you could recycle it. We're struggling with it because it's a manual process. But the box had the cardboard we could separate, but then there was always bags of air in there too that we can't recycle or would contaminate the box. In most cases we'd still recycle the box somehow, but those air bags, those plastic bags we just struggle with. And the box is just we've all been there where it's a big huge box and you open it and ends up being a small item and
So, two questions. One is, have you had any success, thought about incentive programs that are based for, village residents to do the right thing, which are often, involves, they have to take a picture before you put it in the bin. And the other question is, have you looked into the Dow Energy Bank program and your comments on that? Is there any way you can explain it? Do you know what it is? You're familiar with it, right?
a little bit familiar. I'm not
So the
significantly familiar with the program.
Well, why don't you take a swing at the incentives?
The incentive, we've thought about incentives, but I think having a new facility, I mean, we have some of the lowest residual rates, meaning percent of garbage coming out of our single stream recycling facility. We're under 15% as a facility, and we take about 80% of the city of Chicago's recycling at our facility. So if we didn't take the city's recycling stream, we think we'd be about 7 or 8% residual, which is phenomenal. That means that our customers are doing a very good job. Our technology is doing a very good job, where we just don't have a high residual rate. Now we have thought about a program like a recycle bank. There's also a company, I can't think of the name of it. It had a recycling name to it, but now it's really just a rewards program. But it's really hard. People think that the more they recycle, they're getting something, but we can't really measure it. We just figure if they sign up for it, they're part of the program, and hopefully they're getting all the education information that we send them via email. And that's a program that we're looking to start here, just to encourage recycling and messaging, and it allows residents then to have some sort of rewards where it might be a discount at some of the local stores. Something which is better than nothing for just doing what you should be doing at the curb or in your alley. So
the Dow program is a cover bag where you put those items that are on your do not recycle list, including film, and those are collected, and they'll go to usually alternative energy. They're landfill avoidance programs, but in some parts of the country, they're used to be chemical advanced recycling, chemical recycling plastics. So that's what there was any thought about that, and so because that way you just again increase what you can put in the bin. There is a fee for it, but
that's what I thought it was. I thought maybe it was more elaborative than that. So we're about to break ground on a new facility in Chicago that will be a massive facility. And we will probably look at something like that because we do have a relationship with Covanta Energy, which is a waste to energy facility in Indianapolis. We currently take certain waste streams from the Chicago market, bring it to our facility, put it in a bigger truck, and send it to Indianapolis to turn it into energy. So it never sees a landfill. And that's kind of what you're talking about. We could take these items that have like a high BTU value, that could be very helpful for a Covanta Energy, and take it in the, you know, those same truckloads down there. And yeah, that would be interesting. I thought there was just a little bit more science behind it and difficulty separating some of the items, but yeah, in that form, that's something we could look at. Also, with our new facility, we're also looking at taking number 6 polystyrene.
Yes.
Yep. So that should be really helpful. And again, that will be a small grant that we're getting from a manufacturer, so they can capture more of that number 6 plastic. So now the last question I had here was in regards to food scrap composting. As an organization, I think we've had as much experience as anybody in this region, especially. We launched a program 5 years ago in Highwood and in Highland Park with year-round programs. Highland Park was a pilot program that's now turned into a year-round program where residents can opt in for the program. Not extremely successful as far as number of residents that are doing it as a percentage of the community, but it keeps increasing every year, which is exciting. We give a separate bin for the food scrap material, and education is critical to it, because contamination will kill programs like this, because the compost facilities just aren't really set up to separate contaminants from the organic material. In April, we started a year-round program in Deerfield, but what Deerfield wanted to do is they said no opt-in. Everyone's getting a cart. You're forced to use it. If you don't want to recycle your food scraps, use it to, you know, store something, you know, from your garage in there. They said, we're not taking them back. And so we delivered over 6,000 35-gallon carts for food scrap recycling. And the percent of people doing it is probably about 20 to 25% of the community is recycling some sort of food scrap material that they weren't before. So we have found a lot of success there. We are working on some contamination issues. You know, one thing that we've learned is some of the items that we're accepting currently are like napkins, unwaxed paper plates, and cups. I think I'd have to get rid of the paper plates and cups. I don't think people realize what a waxed cup is, which is your traditional hot cup. We got solo cups that are in there. So there are some items. I again, going to what we talked about earlier with, you know, simplification. And I think we just got to leave it with food scrap material and maybe fiber, like a pizza box that's coated in oil and grease and cheese, and really simplify it. So, but it's definitely not going away. Food scrap recycling will become more popular. Right now, I will say it is a cost, because again, going back to our very inexpensive disposal options in the Chicago market, recycling food scraps is more expensive. We have to go further away to get to for homes for the compostable material, and we just don't have the infrastructure currently to make it a more cost-effective program. And
What
so
would it-
communities
what would it
doing it
take-
is being subsidized.
Sorry, what would it take to get that infrastructure? I mean, so if you consider Skokie, if Skokie got together with its neighboring communities, you know, I guess at what level would you say, like, okay, we're gonna build a place closer to compost these food scraps and create a product?
It's a great question. I mean, as a company, we built a digester. Max, I think you were at that ribbon cutting. It is gone now, because even though we could create a nice soil amendment from food scrap material, we couldn't find outlets for it locally. We couldn't find sustainable outlets, you know, customers that would even take it for free. And so it got to the point where stockpiling the material, and that was a challenge. Now, maybe we were just 5 to 10 years ahead of ourselves, and that could come back around, because I don't think we'll see large compost facilities with windrows in the area. We had a company that attempted an unincorporated Glenview at Central and just east of Milwaukee Avenue, attempted to build a compost facility on an old landfill, and the community shut it down. And that would have been fantastic. It was called Patriot Acres. would have been a great infrastructure for the North Shore and Northwest suburbs to have, an area for compostable material. And the city of Glenview and a couple of their neighbors just squashed it in the 11th hour. So we've got material now going to Wakanda. If you guys know where that is, it's far. And even further away than that, we've got to send compost material to, and double handle it. So we've got to take it to a facility, put it in bigger trucks to get it to these faraway locations. So.
I was just wondering, not to get too far off of into the weeds, but why exactly? I'm just a little bit curious. What like the opposition might have been to that in the first place. I mean, because it seems like it would have potentially laid the groundwork for something that could have worked.
I mean, I don't know the specific details. I think economics had something to play. Because it would have taken away some revenue from the solid waste agency in Northern Cook County, and hurt some of their member communities a little bit. I think there could have been a deal struck there to make it work for both parties. And then a real concern is, and I don't think there's homes immediately close to there, but if you think a landfill might smell bad, a compost facility smells a lot worse. And so that's a real issue that was probably raised, even if it wasn't real, it was perceived to be an issue, and that's never going to get local support, just perception of it. And if you know that area, there's really not much over there, but the perception of smell and rodents and it didn't help the group that was trying to build out the infrastructure.
Yeah, I'm familiar with some parts of Glenview, but I'm not particularly familiar with where that is. So that's why I wasn't entirely sure what the entire context of that particular situation was.
Yeah, this is old Archdiocese property. It was a landfill. It's the solid waste agency in Northern Cook County's transfer station backs up to it. Des Plaines River kind of comes in over there. I thought it was a good area, but again, this is for brighter minds, I guess, to have made this decision. So, but it's unfortunate because we do need some infrastructure locally where we could take direct loads somewhere that we could turn it into a usable, compostable item. In many cases, this stuff's being turned into soil amendment and mulches and things like that.
I have another question also that's probably going to be difficult to answer because you were just saying that that you don't necessarily have a lot of outlet for this material, but I guess I'm wondering how it defrays the cost of waste, right? So I mean, if you're removing compostable like food scraps from your garbage, right, that can be a significant portion of your waste depending on what kind of household you are, and how does that compare? I mean, at what point does it make financial or economic sense to defray that, to remove the food waste to make it economically viable, to reduce waste?
I have a little bit of that answer, but time will tell because we're doing a study in Deerfield since we have a bigger group to review it. Most of the carts in Deerfield we're picking up, and think about the food scrap you produce over a week, even a 35-gallon cart, which is about a third of the size of what most Skokie residents have for their garbage. People are only filling up a quarter of it or less. So most of these bins, it's very insignificant amount of food waste that's going in during a week. But then we've got to put an extra truck out there to collect it all. And so that's somewhat the challenge from an economic perspective. And then, like we talked about earlier, just getting it somewhere. But I think as you see disposal prices creep up and more infrastructure be built, there is a balance there that we don't have the answer for. And it might not be how much each resident actually produces in food scrap to make it work, but how much of the population of a community is involved in it and doing it to see if there's an impact on the waste stream then.
Right.
So that, because you might see a 20% reduction in your disposal cost. Does that make up for the cost of putting the organics program out there?
Right. And so do you think like a resident who's filling up a third of their 35-gallon container, do you think that that's, sort of normal use, or is that, people who are not aware and not doing it as diligently, or, you know, not sort of saving every single scrap? Like there are still scraps that go in the garbage. What do you think is
I think it's a good, I mean, I do it at home. I have a tough time filling a third of my bin.
okay?
It's just,
Okay.
now maybe I consume more and eat everything on my plate. I don't
That's
know, but
efficient. That's really good. That's really efficient.
it's, but I do cook at home. So, you know, it's great for vegetables and fruits and, you know, that type of the prep work. But then, yeah, at the end of the day, or at the end of a meal, you know, we've got a bin that we're using for the food scrap material, and it's tough to fill that bin. It's
Yeah.
tough to get more than 25% to a third when you're talking just food scrap material. So
And then do you mix it with yard waste?
I don't have yard waste at my house, but you can, yes,
So, I mean, does the program mix it with yard waste, or are they
Yes.
separate? They are, okay, it's the same.
yes.
Yeah.
And that does help. It helps with the smell. It helps with containing the material. We did a program for Loyola University years ago, and they're still recycling their food scraps there, but we did it without yard waste. And it's just very juicy. That stuff would end up all the way down Ashland at every stoplight. So not good. So mixing it with yard waste definitely helps. So
Was there something specific about Deerfield that, I was wondering why, how did Deerfield get a program like this as opposed to some other municipality?
they desired it. It was something they wanted to do. They thought that, and they were right, they had the scale to do it with 6,000 plus homes. That's a critical part of the equation as well, if you want to do it for the whole community. And they were willing to pay for it. They found ways to come up, you know, within their budget to say, we're going to pay for this program and see if we can make it work. And so again, this has been since April, so time will tell. We do have the ability to make it an every other week collection in the winter months, which will also be helpful. So they've been, you know, it's a partnership. So we're looking at ideas to make it work so that it is sustainable, not only with good, clean material, but also economically sustainable.
Do you think, I guess, aside from if the village here is willing to put up, to pay for it, you can't speak to that, but do you think, you can't speak to that, but do you think Skokie would be a candidate for a program like this one?
It could be challenging in Skokie, and that's because I think we've got 80+% of the community is alley service, and that in itself can make it more challenging. You know, it's nice when a resident could take possession of that cart and keep it inside. If they're going to keep it in the alley, you know, it allows for more contamination.
When you say inside, where
In a garage, or at least on private property, so that you know, it's not being used by the community. But you know, we're working with the city of Chicago now on ideas, which again is mostly alley as well, of do we have, like, you know, and again, to lower the cost, do you have maybe, you know, a couple sections in the alley with a 95-gallon cart that are community drop-offs for food scrap material, where multiple homes can share that cart and significantly reduce the expense. Now, again, the big question is, what does that contamination look like, though? You know, when you have maybe, you know, instead of 40 carts in an alley, maybe it's 5 that are being shared. But what I would suggest, if it's something that the community really wanted, do it on a small basis with a pilot program with a section of Skokie, kind of like what the city of Chicago did with their single stream recycling program back in 2011. They did it with a small portion of the population throughout the city, though, but you know, a small piece in all 6. What, you know, they put it in 6 zones and didn't roll it out to every single homeowner until end of 2013, 2 years later.
How did you determine the size of the carts?
That was something that, with the case of Deerfield, they wanted the small cart so that it didn't become cumbersome for homeowners, you know, for residents dealing with that third bin now in the garage or on their property. So the smaller one was appealing. And also too, if you're looking to grab food scrap material primarily, You don't need anything larger for an
No, I was
individual
wondering
home.
that, to me, even that seems pretty big, because in Skokie, we have collective resource as an option for people
Mhm.
to
Which is a great program.
buy into it. I do that in a 5-gallon bucket, which we fill every week. It's compacted, but if we had a 10-gallon bucket, I don't think we'd fill it. We're a household of 6. So I'm just wondering if we were to look at something like that, if a smaller bucket would be an option. And the collective resource model also works for, and they're on a much smaller scale. They're not doing the big trucks like we would do. And so alley versus not alley is not an issue because people keep, they, the concierge service where you put your bucket wherever you want.
Yeah, they give you an empty, take the full. Yeah.
Right. And on a large scale that might have to be different. Just wondering what the experience is with that, with those size bins, and given that they're not being swapped out. Also, I guess, I don't know, have you had any feedback from the bins themselves in summer, since the spring and summer with the program? How are they getting all that stuff out of there?
Well, we're using the automation on our trucks. And so that's what's nice too, is we could lift it with automation. The same tipper that would lift the large 95-gallon carts could lift the 35-gallon carts. We haven't tried the 5 or 10-gallon buckets. It would, potentially be more challenging. It'd have to be probably more manual, or the driver would have to get out of his vehicle, bend down to grab the bucket on the curb and throw the material in and leave the resident back with that dirty bucket. But the 35-gallon carts are easier to clean. We've suggested to residents to use like a craft bag or brown paper bag for your food scrap material. That's what I do. I'll grab a brown paper bag when I'm at the grocery store, at least one a week, and use that for my food scrap. And then I put the whole thing in the bin, and it's worked pretty well. But again, we're kind of new at this too. I mean, we're trying some programs here. It's very new to this market. I'm one of the founding members of the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition. You're more than welcome to join one of our meetings. They're all remote right now. And the coalition's been around for about 5 years now. But we're picking up momentum. We're picking up best practices from throughout the country and trying to come up with ideas so that we can make food scrap recycling a reality for most of the area as much as we can. So, but the challenges are infrastructure with managing the material, but then also having outlets so that, because if everyone's going to recycle their food scrap material, we don't have enough outlets for it right now. So we've got to work with some partners to see who can use this, beneficial, material for farms and on a mass scale if we're going to produce this much. So that's another big challenge that our group's dealing with, but I haven't brought that to the communities yet because we're not at that point, but we're getting there. We've had one large facility close down this year. They have too much material they can't get rid of. That's a problem. So. Any other questions?
Yeah, Josh, I don't know if you have these stats, but I was curious about how Skokie compares to the other communities that you guys serve in terms of like pounds per size of population. Like, what's the comparison?
I don't have that information in front of me, but I do know just at the top of my head, it is on the lower end when you compare it to communities north of Skokie. Like Winnetka, Glencoe, Highland Park, those are some of our customers. They're big consumers up there though. So I wouldn't take that as a fault. They just consume a lot. They've got more boxes like you've never seen. I think Amazon's at some of these homes every day. But when you compare it to other like communities, Skokie does a really good job with recycling. And then I think the numbers are, have you seen some of the Swank comparison numbers with like Niles and Des Plaines and that? It's very comparable. And
Yeah, and Jim, Swank produces a scorecard for all the member communities, so we have that comparative data, and we'd be happy to get that together. Yeah, as Josh has said, generally, the northern suburban communities consume more, recycle well, so their numbers per capita do tend to run higher than ours, but then our numbers, I think, are very comparable to our surrounding communities. But yeah, we can get that scorecard information for the commission.
And lightweighting is hurt too, you know, a lot of the bottles and cans are just lighter than they used to be. And so when you compare even Skokie today versus Skokie 10 years ago, that's not a fair comparison either.
Josh, do you do the toters for Deerfield too? Have you seen the families that are participating in food compost? Are they asking for smaller toter sizes for refuse?
Not yet.
Okay.
But that's a good question because, you know, it's tough when you're talking 5 to 10 gallons like you've got at your home. It's really tough to reduce your cart size for just 5 gallons of food scrap. It's not a big enough difference to get down to that 65 gallon. So I don't think we'll see that, but we're measuring it though. We're tracking that data to see what homeowners switch from a larger size to a smaller size.
So I know there's some multi-unit buildings in Skokie, and I know that that's sort of a different pickup style, but I think that those might be like a really good opportunity as far as efficiency of pickup, right? If you have like a larger container and you know, residents of those buildings can bring their scraps to a larger container, that can certainly be a more efficient process. Right. I think this is what you were saying, that maybe there's one container that is shared amongst multiple households. Like that's actually a pretty good application of that, right? When it's a multi-unit building. So I'm wondering if you have any insight on like if there's a difference, if that actually is more efficient, if it is more, you know, cost effective, whatever.
It's definitely efficient. I mean, we're doing that with most of the multifamily buildings. We've got a central container. We do have a few properties that don't have recycling. And most of those are just because of space constraints or parking, you know, needs versus container needs. But we do have most of the multifamily in Skokie does have recycling service offered with a centralized container.
Oh, I mean food scraps, right? To
Food scrap,
take
yeah.
that, yeah.
It could work to this, you know, the same way. Yep, they could. Space is the big need, especially for the multifamily. Just getting the recycling is one thing. You know, you look for the organics. It can be challenging, but it's doable.
Do you, at your facility, only process what you collect yourself, or do you accept recyclables collected by municipalities?
Yeah, we do. We are an outlet for some of the other waste haulers, as well as municipalities that haul their own material, bring it directly to our facility as well. So yes. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I am always available for any additional questions or comments. And again, if the group is willing, we could set up a tour of our single stream recycling facility. I think that always helps when people see how it's recycled and what the material looks like coming in and what it looks like when we're finished. You know, even educated folks like yourself, it's impressive and it tells a story. And I would encourage that. It's always a good thing. So
I'm fortunate that we got it. So,
we can't get Bob out of there.
Where's it at?
It's Forest View, so it's I-55 in Harlem. So really not too bad from here. If there's no traffic getting down to, you know, downtown, you just jump on 55 and yeah, it's about 25, 30 minutes from here with no traffic. So.
Would it be possible to have a video of it to share
Yes.
on our social media?
Yep, I've got something that's a little bit propaganda, but I can get that. It's actually on our website, lrsrecycles.com. And you hit the YouTube icon in the upper right corner of our website. There's a YouTube icon, and you'll see all of our videos there for construction and demolition recycling, where we've got some video, and then our single stream recycling videos are all right there. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is to go over some old business. First is the refuse fee update and public hearing dates, which we had talked about at our meeting in in a little bit last month, and I understand that Max has some updates for us.
Yeah, thank you. I was just whispering with Liz. I think she sent out to you an information piece about the draft timeline for the hearing. So Ann Tennis had prepared for us last week two options for the holding of public hearings, one of which would have held a public hearing to allow for prior publication in the new Skokie. However, in order to accommodate the new Skokie's publication timeline, would have put us holding that listening session, I think was referred to as, after the beginning of the refuse fee in early November. And I know some of the commission members were particularly sensitive to that timeline. So in reviewing that with Jenny last week, we had selected in concept what was option 2 in that communication plan, which is what I believe, Elizabeth, that he emailed out to you earlier, and what I think you have before you this evening. So that draft communication plan and listening session plan is before you. So I'd be happy to entertain your thoughts or comments with respect to that. Just to review, I think the intention is to follow the publication plan that's laid out here before you, solicit commentary from the public in advance of the hearing date. Those comments can be submitted in advance. We would hold that public session. The intention is to hold it here. We would utilize what is referred to by the staff and by Ann as the 3-minute shot clock. So the intention is to receive comments from the public with respect to their thoughts on waste reduction initiatives, recycling initiatives, and the like. And again, the intention is not to put this commission in the position of having a debate back and forth in terms of pros and cons necessarily or anything like that, but it is intended to represent an opportunity for the public to be heard, to offer their opinions on these subject matters, such that we can gather the comments and thoughts of the public for then synthesizing those inputs and ultimately considering them at a follow-on meeting of the commission, and then forwarding that on to the village board for their consideration.
So is the, so people will be able to send, comments through info@skokie.org or mail them in.
Yes,
And those comments will be included in the comments that are received and gathered during the listening session.
that's correct.
And then what are we doing after that? We're then first draft. What is the first draft of what?
Well, we would have then the listening session on October 26th.
Correct.
Then we'd be working on development of recommendations for, I see it as recommendations of items for further study that would then represent this commission's thoughts about ways forward with respect to the subject matter, the core matter being potential for alterations to the village's waste systems, the potential for ways to minimize waste, the potential for ways to boost recycling. And so, as we've talked frequently, the original board direction was conceptualizing, hearing back for things that are potentially actionable during the village's upcoming budget cycle, which would begin around about the first of the year. As you know, and you've heard me say many times, I really think this is probably 2 years worth of work, but nonetheless, I think we need to gather together and talk about those potential alterations and begin thinking about, at the very least, sort of some form of first report or midterm type of report out to the board in the aftermath of hearing those public comments.
So potentially this could come up for recommendations that would be incorporated in next year's program.
That's correct.
as far as the actual sessions go, I know that in the email that we received, this was actually, I think, attached to that. I'm looking at it now here on my phone. It says one consideration might be 2 sessions, one virtual and another in person. Are we contemplating doing something like that, particularly in light of the sort of uncertain situation with regards to the virus and all of that sort of thing? Or are we just doing then the one in person, or I don't know? Seems like
Yeah, Ranger, I really think the purpose of putting that question back out there before the commission is that there had been some commentary from commission members about whether to hold 1 or 2 listening sessions. I would say honestly, I think the sense of the staff is that given the opportunity for the public to submit their comments in advance, given what we intend to do in terms of publicizing the opportunity, our feeling is that probably 1 hearing or listening session it will probably suffice, but that given that there were prior comments from commissioners, we thought we would throw that out to you tonight and get a solicitation of opinions from the commission as to whether you have strong feelings that there should be a second listening opportunity. And if so as well, given that there may, who knows what our situation will be by the end of October, if there were to be a second listening session, should we entertain one that's virtual only versus what our intention is at this point, which is to hold one that's conducted in person, assuming we're still able to do that.
Well, we originally were envisioning this as being something separate from our meeting, some independent thing, public event. But my understanding is that it's going to be in place of our October, or would have been our November meeting. So if it's going to be in place of our meeting, it seems like we would do it as a one-time event. I mean, if it's so popular that, or we get a lot of people who want to participate but don't want to come in person, maybe that presents the opportunity to have something that's just a virtual event sometime shortly after that. I would think that if people are interested but don't want to come in person, they would make that known with it, and so we have the time to set something like that up.
That seems a reasonable thought to me. I mean, if we were to do one that's virtual, I mean, logistically, it doesn't seem to me to be too big an undertaking to get one organized in fairly short order. I wouldn't think, with our ability to push things out, social media and other. So I would say, yeah, that seems like something we could sort of play out by ear.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, my sense is that if there are multiple opportunities for people, there's going to be a station in there. And I think, one in person would be sufficient, or if we want to do a virtual one and a person one. As long as people have alternate options to submit comments, not necessarily have to be committed to one particular.
I mean, couldn't we just have it be like we have one meeting planned, but we have, say, potential for a second one, so that covers our bases? Say, not saying there will be one, but there is potential, so it just gives us the option.
Yeah, I like the idea of, October 26th, and then maybe a week later, we have a virtual plan.
I found that about 2 weeks was a good amount of time for meetings, like for public meetings in the municipality that I work in. Giving 2 weeks notice on social media and just, working to get it out to the public. 2 weeks was pretty good for a virtual meeting, where people can join from home. And then also having a form where people can submit questions ahead of time was actually quite productive as well, because it allowed us to address certain things up front instead of having, sort of the same people asking the same question or only half listening, like waiting to be able to ask their question. So addressing it up front was kind of helpful.
The idea though of this is not really, we're not really gonna be addressing people's
Oh,
concerns.
okay.
So, but if people have submitted questions in advance, I would think that would be to kind of go with what you're saying, to read those questions off first, so that if somebody's, or 7 people are waiting in the wings to ask that same question,
Yeah.
it's already been said, and then they don't have to ask, they can still stay, but, you know, then they don't have to ask that question, somebody's already said it, and it's been read succinctly by us, and they know it's received.
So the point of these sessions are to listen more so than.
That's correct. And so, I mean, I would think, and I would want to add that, and I think, Jim, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I think though, I know one of the concerns from some commissioners is this is not intended to be the venue or the forum to hear from people who want to come in and ask you, why is there a refuse fee? Right? And so part of this is going to be decidedly about, when this messaging goes out, is about the purpose of this is to hear comments and solicit resident feedback on the subject matters at hand, which is waste reduction and recycling and some of those things. This is not, like it or not, is not intended to be a Q&A about why did you do or not do certain things on a whole range of other issues. And so some of the Q&A from session 1, if there is a session 2, might make for sort of useful preamble commentary to sort of set the scene for what this second hearing is about. But I just want to throw that caution out there, because I know there's some sensitivity to, you know, what the commission's role is to be that night. And so I know that the MC, whoever that might ultimately end up being for that evening's events, is not going to want to feel as if they're there presiding over, you know, Q&A about defending of the refuse fee or some other subject matters that might come up. So I just want the commission to have some comfort in that regard.
Do you have a sense from Anne as to how much of this report is our recommendations versus public input? A report just on the public input.
Oh, I think when it comes to recommendations with respect to sort of what I'll call the core assignment from the village board, the recommendations are yours. I think what the holding of the public hearing and receive the public comment on that is information points for the board as to, you know, the pulse and the feel of public commentary that was engendered as, you know, as part of the discussion. But I think in terms of thoughts about the subject matter of waste minimization and boosting of recycling, I think the board is looking for the recommendations from this group.
But not just the retelling of what people want. Our own original.
Well, the way I'm hearing it is to get a sense of the pulse of what the priorities of the community are, what they'd like to see. And then there would be a process of investigating what would be alternatives for delivering on that. So it wouldn't just be a regurgitation of public comment, but really that public comment would then inform the investigations of what the options are.
I think that's a great characterization.
So just from the timeline, we, in order to get the first draft to the commission as a whole from the subcommittee, we would be working on this before the public listening session.
Well, in what way?
Well, unless, I mean, okay, so if the meeting is October 26th and we're supposed to have a draft 2 weeks later of a full comprehensive idea of recommendations, That's a pretty short timeline.
In other words, you better have a rough draft before the 26th.
If the report is, when I first read this, my first impression, since this is the first I had heard the idea of us putting something in writing to the board, at least under this kind of timeline. So my first impression was that this is a report of just what the community wants. Which I think as something that's a recommendation from us is more useful, but just from a timeline perspective, that's just over 2 weeks.
So certainly, that's a really good question. It implies that there'd be a subcommittee. I mean, it would imply that we define a subcommittee prior to that. The subcommittee would meet and have some basic outlines you're suggesting, Jim, so like some sort of like maybe brainstorming or just like, okay, what are the options here that we might be inclined to present? We don't present that to anybody. We just sort of, gather that as kind of our own informational kind of thing. The public comments, gather in the public comments, and then from that, then informs a refining of whatever that.
Right, because if we're sitting down after October 26th to put something together, that's
No, it's not. I mean, I would look at this as it stands today. I would focus in on the draft and the discussion of the draft and what ultimately moves on from that point into December. I would focus in on the receipt of the public commentary, preparation of that, and how you convey some of that information to the village board. To me, if we're thinking more ambitiously about preparation of draft and report to the village board, to the degree that it includes thought out conclusions about the finality of the subject matter of your work, I'm going to tell you, I don't think that goal is going to be accomplished. So take solace in the fact that I agree with you that final report will not be done in December.
okay. Just
So
trying to
so
understand what you're
transmittal,
saying
if you
to us.
will, of your reporting of the public comments that were received and sort of the gist of that and how it might fit in to the commission's work plan as you move forward from that, I think is fine. If that's the concern. That's the concern. Yeah. I totally get that. Yeah.
So it's the question, of course, tonight.
I think
in terms
Lisa
of what
has
we
a
want to
question.
try. Do we want? Oh, sorry. All right.
Lisa?
Oh, hi, thank you. I have a question. If I understand the purpose of the meeting, of the October 26th meeting, isn't Mr. Connell's new list of recyclables relevant? Like, don't we need to get that out to people as well prior to the listening meeting? Am I understand? Because he's saying it sort of simplifies recycling, and if people could see that, or is it not relevant at all?
I think I'm happy to hear others' opinions. I mean, I think it's certainly relevant to that discussion and certainly would be part of it. I mean, utilizing his information, pushing that out to our community as part of a messaging to help, simplify and enhance the understanding of recycling, which should certainly be part of it. But yeah, I agree with that.
So do you guys have that in front of you? Is that what he gave you?
Yeah, I emailed it to you, Lisa. I don't know if it came through. I took a picture of it while he was talking and emailed
Oh,
it.
I
So-
didn't look. I didn't check my email, so I'll look. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
Okay, so will that go out in like a new Skokie or something like that before this October 26th meeting, or along with the notice of the meeting?
Yeah, I given the publication schedule, do you remember the publication schedule? I'm looking at Liz. I'm gonna guess it probably wouldn't go out in the new Skokie, although it might. There'd be maybe one more before this. I know we were tight on time for anything to go in the new Skokie before October 26th. We're really close on time, even right now. But the host of, the other, what I would consider to be more nimble communication vehicles, I mean, we're much more flexible on those. So,
Yeah, I guess wouldn't
some of those other things.
wouldn't the next one, I guess, be going out in like early November? So the next edition would not be till like, I know that would not be till like after this proposed session.
Yeah, it sounds right. Because I know had we opted for, the schedule with being published in New Skokie, we would have been on a super tight timeline to be committed to that already. So.
Yeah, I actually didn't realize, like I emailed Liz and about actually including some information in this one, September, October, because they're now all seem to be double issues. And I didn't realize the same day that I emailed about that the digital version, the PDF had gone up on the website, and I guess it had gone ready to print. So I guess the next thing would be like November, which would be after the session.
But
So would it be possible to attach this information with the invite for the public hearing? Even as a link? So that way the audience that's interested has the opportunity to at least get some exposure to it.
I don't see why not.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. I agree with that, to get this out, because this is actually helpful. It's a lot simpler than Bob's explanation.
Good video.
Nothing against Bob. Nothing against Bob.
We're all plastic
nerds.
We can have Bob make a separate video
Yeah,
sometime.
I'm a video star. Yeah. But I guess the question I have, in terms of what you're asking us tonight, are you asking us to say, the schedule that Ann put together is what we want to do, or do we have some revisions that, like, there's some talk of doing a virtual session as well as an in-person one? Do we want to add a virtual session as an optional? Or do we want to go ahead and schedule a virtual session up front, or do we just want to go with what the schedule is here?
I think the only potential advantage, to adding the virtual session depends on how much discussion we're comfortable with having. I think because if we're just really seeking comment but not looking to engage in discussion, then having a separate virtual session or a separate session, separate virtual session, it just gives people an extra week they can come in and read their comments and listen to other people's comments. But if we're not really responding to the comments, then are they getting anything out of it other than can they just submit their comments on email?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you that it seems like adding another session, if we're just listening, if people can't make it in person, then they can just email them or, whatever else. I guess I'm also a little bit jaded because I feel like at this point, the chances of us actually holding something in person are just like dwindling, crashing. And I kind of get the feeling that this is just going to get kicked to virtual anyway. And so are we sort of doing all this work for something that's just going to be 2 virtual sessions, right?
Well, I guess the format would be sort of similar if we're all virtual? Maybe? Or are we still having people come on and there's still some kind of presentation by whomever and then? Yes.
So would there be an opportunity to do a combination like what we're doing here? I don't know, how many do you have a license for Zoom for how many people can you invite? You know, I also, I mean, I'll be point blank, I don't anticipate this to be a wildly popular event that has hundreds of people.
I didn't want to downplay your popularity,
Yeah.
but I kind of didn't think you were going to draw big for your second one either. So
I know what kind of guy I have. It's not really great. So, no, but seriously, I mean, the concern I have about having a second session is that it just there wouldn't be enough demand to justify having a second session. But I do want to ensure that people have the appropriate opportunities, whether it's a direct, you know, combination in person, virtual, or whether it's through email, that they have an opportunity to submit their input.
Yeah. I think it's a good point that, you know, somebody who has access to a virtual meeting has access to send us an email too. So
Do they feel,
that is the
you know, do
preferred
they feel
alternative.
heard though, I guess that's what I worry about a little bit. Do they feel heard in the meeting?
I don't think that a virtual meeting is going to change that in my experience with like whether people are feeling heard or not. I think, you know, yeah, I think that
It's sufficient. I mean, plenty of notice here. I mean, I think, you know, Skokie News reminders, the 19th and then October. When the beginning, starting September 28th, invite comments by Skokie News. I mean, that sounds like it's going to have several notices that go out. People do notice the Skokie News. You know, I think that's a fair, you know, amount of notification. So I don't think there's you know, there's always going to be people who feel like, oh, I never had a chance, but I think there's seems to be ample opportunity.
I guess one question I had, just as a follow-up to Emily, is she mentioned generating a form, which we can do on our website. And so do you want to have direct questions, almost like a survey, you know, that people, you know, like regarding composting, regarding once a week versus twice a week? You know, is that more helpful to the subcommittee than people, you know, maybe just general comments, you know? So that's one thing that we could certainly develop in advance if that helps. Guided questions, I guess, would be the.
I mean, I could certainly see, like, in my opinion anyway, for those who are, you know, looking for my 2 cents, I think, I mean, certainly that could be useful, particularly if we absolutely want to sort of hit on certain topics. That could be potentially a useful thing.
Yeah, that would mean producing some sort of, I think a short, quick and dirty survey might be useful. Just a range of responses.
It would give you some nice percentages, maybe.
Yeah. So what's the next step then?
When should we be putting this something together now? Then? As opposed, or wait till next meeting?
Whatever your preference is.
Does there have to be 3 of us?
Pardon?
No, can it only be 3 of us on the subcommittee? So as to not have a confusing.
So you're 12, right?
Right, so I think it's the majority of the quorum. What?
Do we have total?
We have 12, so
12.
quorum would be, well, a quorum would be 7. So majority of quorum.
We're saying it in 3.
If we have a majority of quorum, we trigger the meetings act. So if we have 3, we don't. So we have a committee of Is anybody interested in this subcommittee?
I'll participate.
All right.
So- So who was that? Emily, Jim, and Jen?
Yes, Emily, Jim.
All right, and then. So, yeah.
All right.
We can, talk, see if we wanna. Find some stuff. Yeah, we'll talk more next meeting. I think to get a better sense of how the meeting will run in October. Who may give some sort of presentation at the beginning. Okay, so
One of you three, right?
I think it's best it's somebody who,
I was just seeing if you were
has
paying
a strong
attention and how
level.
loud I was talking. I don't,
All right,
I'll bring Josh back. I was gonna tell you later.
zero waste and spend on that.
Sure.
Okay, that's next one.
All right. Two things on Backlot Bash. Anne had left me a voicemail today, and I don't know if anybody opened Skokie e-News today. Okay. And so the top clicks were not received anything with COVID. It was not the bans on for the bash. It was Charlie's development of some bike routes for Bike to the Bash. So you have successfully been the most popular thing on Skokie e-News today. So so check it out. Skokie Charlie developed different routes through town for safe bikes to the bash, includes bike racks, and it's just a neat thing. We posted it there and also through the park district. So hopefully we see an increase of bikers there. As far as the zero waste, things are looking pretty good. I advertised the volunteers, District 219. We did Skokie e-News and also Go Green Skokie. If anybody's interested, we do still have, as of earlier today, at least 2 spots for Saturday night. So anybody here is interested in volunteering, those spots are still available. And it's about all I have. It's just similar to a couple of years ago where they're going to, there's going to be food sorting stations, and I know Jenny participated a few years ago, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And then the greenhouse gas inventory, we did meet with Delta. They gave us, the list of everything that they needed. I've been going on a little bit of back and forth on them to just clarify some of the data, so I don't go into a bunch of work without knowing specifically what they need, and got those responses I think late last week, and so we're pretty much ready to start gathering the data on that. As they mentioned in the presentation, it's a lot of pulling our energy bills and our miles on our vehicles and that kind of stuff. So a budget, a lot of budget numbers. What's that? Yeah, I thought so. I like them, working with them, and I think they're gonna give us some very reasonable next steps and that are gonna be productive. So yeah. And then electric aggregation, I'm sure everyone here got their letter last week. And so just a recap on that program, there just weren't savings overall. So we have been getting some calls on that. Back in 2010, 2011, there was like $6 million of savings through that program. And that savings was able to go directly to the residents of Skokie. For this program, the market just isn't there. And so it's definitely a very unique program. Skokie's essentially expected to get about $124,000 a year on some low cost to serve accounts. Those are generally condos or businesses that might use off-peak energy or things like that. And so, we're just, we don't get the money until we're in the program for a year. And so we're going to be looking at budgeting after the greenhouse gas. We'll be talking more about budgeting for fiscal year 23 and how to use those funds. We also want to make sure they're stable, that they can, ComEd has auctions and, there is some contract language to, where they could terminate if an auction price comes back, where they wouldn't make money on it and so forth. So we just want to make sure that funding is stable. We expect it to be stable, but we're kind of watching that this year. So
is there any understanding or expectation, if that's the wrong word, but by the village that those funds would be used for something under the umbrella of sustainability, or are they expected to use those as general?
yeah, I mean, we've talked about it a lot with the renewable energy credits. So some of the North Shore communities are purchasing RECs. I spoke with the consultant. He says those RECs would generally be purchased whether we purchase them or not. There's just, the market is full on them. And so, we feel that a better use of the funds is to actually reduce our energy usage. So, we would probably, one of the first things we're looking at is to continue or vamp up our program for converting our streetlights to LED. We have a very high energy bill for streetlights. So that would be a nice, cost savings for us. And also, on the greenhouse gas inventory goals, I'm sure that would hit both of those.
So at least the funds would still stay within the umbrella of using it for something that is making so more towards sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, that's the intent of the funding. Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'm wondering if at some point, when the funds come in, maybe you're expecting them to be used for some kind of program that furthers the sustainability plan's goals, but then somebody else takes them for something else, where they're just going to.
I think we're going to have some goals that come out of this greenhouse gas emissions survey that are going to be both cost savings to us, so it's going to be very justifiable for us to invest some funding and show that there's going to be a cost benefit. That's where I see that money, maybe being justified to spend. For right now, it's paying for our greenhouse gas inventory. And again, we're just kind of waiting to make sure that is a stable funding source and everything's going as planned. So.
And I actually did notice that there's some information on the village website on the homepage that's been posted for a little while, I guess since early this month. And it does say also there, it kind of does enumerate some of at least the ways in which it's anticipated the revenues will be used. Like, as you said, converting the streetlights from the current bulbs to LEDs, and for the greenhouse gas inventory and all of that. I also will say, I don't know how, I assume there are quite a few people who are on the solar, the community solar program. And we actually got a letter, an email that says that we're not going to be automatically transitioned, obviously, to this other electric aggregation program, and that it's not recommended for those who are on the community solar program to switch to this other program themselves, because they wouldn't necessarily realize the savings, the 20%.
Yeah, that's right. I do need to get an update on community solar, but I'm expecting that just the existence of this program is bumping some people to that program because they're realizing that they're not going to achieve, direct savings. And so, as soon as they call the village, we let them know about the community solar program. People have had a big interest in it, when they call. And so I'm interested in seeing the numbers, before and after.
So is everybody in Skokie going to be put into this aggregation program, or is is this something that people voluntarily sign up?
No, so it is an opt-out. The way that the market is there are certain accounts within Skokie that are considered a low cost to serve. That's the only margin of profit that there is right now for those particular accounts. ICC is requiring us or requiring MC Squared to send a letter to every single account. It's just, they didn't really contemplate this type of program when some of those laws were set up. And so they just require us to notify everyone that a program exists, and everyone is allowed to opt in if they want to, but only certain accounts, those low cost to serve, were identified to be opt-out accounts. Those are the only accounts that have a benefit, you know.
Okay, so if before somebody would get into it, they'd be getting a letter from MC Squared or from the village.
So the letter went out from MC Squared. The village logo is on it. It has MC Squared contact information. So you actually, if you go through your mail, you probably would see it. It went out last week.
Okay.
So every single resident got one. It's just that the letters were different. So the letters for the low cost to serve properties, they received an opt-out letter. And then, just as Andrew stated, if you're in community solar, you're going to receive one that kind of says, we recommend that you stay with your community solar program. And then most people in the village would have gotten one that said for informational only purposes. So
Yeah, there's actually, I was just quoting a little bit of it. It says, for instance, here, because your community solar subscriber, electric service will remain with ComEd's tariff service to receive the guaranteed 20% savings of community solar credits. Your account will not be switched to MC Squared in the electric aggregation program, and we do not recommend you opt in to electric aggregation in order to maintain the guaranteed 20% savings for community solar credits. You'll be receiving a notice by mail that is for only informational regarding the electric aggregation program shortly. And there's additional information there, but yeah.
We also got anything from the village or MC Squared?
I got,
Yeah, we got.
I got one up there.
yeah, I got mine too.
Okay.
It may be because you have solar panels that you're not with the, that
Well,
might
yeah,
be
that's-
one.
my concern is that I already have solar panels and I'm getting that metering and that the switching over to another supplier.
No, so your account would not have been identified. Yeah. Mhm. That's it, unless anybody has any questions.
Okay, new business. Talk about the farmer's market. Is there something new about the farmer's market?
No, just that we're kind of at the tail end of the season and we haven't, to my knowledge, there hasn't been a presence.
No, we, at our last June meeting, Ralph had told us that he was able to get us in at the farmer's market when we wanted to. And we were gonna kind of wait and see what was gonna happen with our fall public session to see if we wanted to use that as an opportunity to promote it or promote whatever associated with that. Does anyone think it's worth it? Everyone on Zoom?
So what would we do? We'd set up a table and just have a presence.
Yeah, I would. And we've done different things over the years, and I think we were thinking to use this as an opportunity, and we can do something totally different too. We can, as long as we have an idea to be there and want to, we can. But to either or promote this session we're having on October 26th, but also just to solicit opinions and let people know that what we're doing with.
I mean, it's not a bad idea, it's just can we have people committed? I mean, I don't want to say yes to something that I know I definitely might commit to. So. Force it on others. So.
At this point, we're having particular dates that we know. Melanie?
No. I mean, we,
If you have a date that you're interested in, I can certainly ask about it.
I'd be willing to, hang out and talk, particularly with this session coming up, there might be some interest or. So if there's a date in mind, if we can identify a date, propose a date. Spend a couple of hours up there.
yeah,
Same here.
maybe the second or third week
of September.
of October. I would think earlier.
Second or third week of October. but, September is kind of.
Yes.
Well, actually, it's a Sunday, right? So
Yeah,
I'd be okay with most of later in September.
You just want me to ask in general?
yeah,
Okay.
if you can ask,
Yeah.
if there are any particular Sundays in the first, I guess, 3 Sundays in October, if any of them are off limits or better than others. The 9th is late, but not Labor Day. The 9th is a holiday weekend. I don't know if people are on that. Right. Well, sorry, the 10th. I'm looking at the wrong date. So the 3rd or 10th, the 10th of October is Indigenous People or Columbus Day, Maryland School District building. Day off,
Oh, I mean, 11.
but that Sunday, I might be out of town, but. But yeah, otherwise the 3rd or the 26th, then it goes into September. Or the 17th of October. So I guess any of those Sundays.
Okay, I'll check into that. And then
Still good for last time before the 26th.
is it you 3 that would be interested? I can just keep the email to you. Okay, all right.
Hopefully though, more people can.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. So then just the date for the next meeting.
Yeah, that would be. September 28th.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, we did get a public comment. Actually.
Yeah,
So the people have an opportunity to take a look at it.
Your comments on the public comment?
No, I just, I think public comments are pretty articulate and raise some concerns about the Amazon and the role of the sustainability plan. I think it's something we should think about. Certainly as we move forward and create a new plan.
Yeah, my comments were, I think they're very fair points. But my other question is, in fairness to the staff reviewing the plan, you have to review the plans against some standards. National accepted standards. I guess my question is, are there accepted environmental standards that plans like that are typically reviewed by other villages? If we don't do it, is there anybody else using a standard set of plans to review against? Or set of standards that you call?
A set of standards. So when you're referring to, in the case of the Amazon case, a set of environmental standards that other communities are applying that we're aware of. No,
Yeah,
I
like environmental impact standards.
broadly speaking, I don't think so. I mean, you're just doing some research on it earlier. I mean, it doesn't seem like it. You're talking almost at things, the suitability of a use as a basis for a zoning decision. which is essentially what this is, right?
Yeah.
It's a land use
Yeah.
decision. Should this type of use be permitted here to the exclusion of a similar use of a similar type, but not this one?
Or
Right.
weigh it somehow.
Right. And so my answer, as I say here today, is, not that I see at a glance. We've done, so I should just, for purposes of background, I had this conversation with a couple of individual members of the commission. I was here, last Monday night at the board meeting on a couple of other different things. So, I heard the Amazon discussion. I talked with village manager Tuesday after the meeting about the Amazon case. We talked about it again Wednesday. Thursday, village manager and I met with Matt Brandmeyer, the community development director, about it. And about this, the same subject matter, there's sort of the juxtaposition. I guess it's certainly the juxtaposition of the sustainability plan and the comprehensive plan and the integration, or maybe in, as case of Monday, the lack of integration. And sort of
Kachava is the world's healthiest all-in-one.
forward, as we're looking at, the formation of a new sustainability plan, how these things need to get reconciled and how one takes into consideration the other. So, as I've told a few of you, I can say, within the administrative apparatus of the village, we're certainly all thinking and talking about the same thing that I know many of you were talking about individually, and other members of the community were talking about in the last week, in terms of, how are the sustainability goals to be incorporated into the land and development review function of the village. So I think there will be many more discussions on that subject matter. I know some members of the staff did do some research, last week, and looking at sort of our comparable communities. And for those of you that have been around for a while, there's 16 or so other communities that the village frequently compares itself with. They're in the near area here. We frequently compare ourselves to for a whole variety of things, from salaries and benefits for our employees to other common things, and they're generally northwest suburban communities. But we very quickly looked at for what other communities of them do some sort of an environmental type assessment as part of their plan review or development review function. And I think there are only 2 of those communities that do some form of that. So I know that Matt has looked in the last week and has done some work on how does he and his department lay out the environmental review process that we do. You may have heard him say, those of you who watched that board meeting, he may have towards the end of his presentation, he put something on the screen about some of the environmental factors that we do look at as part of the plan review process. A lot of those I would consider to be sort of micro factors, if you will, sort of more site plan review items that talk a little bit about stormwater drainage. And my sense obviously is that the issues surrounding the Amazon discussion were really what I would consider to be more macro issues, right? I think there certainly is more discussion, to be had about how do the sustainability goals make their way into the plan. We did have some discussion about, the potentiality for the sustainability goals and objectives that we develop, in the next sustainability plan. How should those be included in the comprehensive plan? And what are the prospects for a revision to the comp plan? And I don't know that there will be a wholesale revision to the comp plan coming up, but we did discuss, would there be, the development of an environmental component to the comp plan that would then include and incorporate, the sustainability plan goals and objectives, such as they may be, into that plan. So, there's certainly an awareness in our discussions that we need to do some thought about how those 2 respective documents, and potentially others, get buried together.
Have a lot of names.
Sure. Hey.
Alma?
Yes, I have a question that maybe I'm just too new, so forgive me if I'm asking something that should be known. But for issues such as the one that's brought up by situation with Amazon or anything similar to where the manufacturing facility is coming to Skokie and opening up a facility or I don't know, new business that potentially could impact sustainability or could impact the environment. Is there a process in place where at least it gets brought up or the Sustainability Commission is informed of it? I was surprised to find out from, a public comment of this situation with Amazon. I personally am currently where my company is going through opening up another facility, and the facility is going to be in Palatine. And so we've had numerous presentations that were presented to the Environmental Commission of the Palatine board, or I'm sorry, it's the Board of Commission for Palatine, or City of Palatine. And we were in a position where we presented the information on the business, the environmental impact, and then we were also questioned and had to go back and explain the situation and how our manufacturing affects the overall environment. So long-winded question, but basically the bottom line is, at what point do we get informed without, searching for what's happening, and how can we help facilitate that, and how can we help with maybe researching and kind of working and rowing in the same direction of protecting our environment?
Yeah, I think the short answer to the question is, as it stands currently, this commission does not get informed about development activities generally, and so will not get informed as a matter of course about any particular development review application or, plan review or building permit application. It's just within the way that Skokie processes its development review. That's something that's beyond the scope and the purview of this commission at this time. So we have talked in the past about whether or not this commission would want to have Matt Brandmeier come and appear. I mean, that's potentially, you have a lot of other items on your agenda right now, but I mean, we can certainly try and make arrangements to do that at some point in time in your work plan. Your work plan is pretty busy right now, but I would also say too, though, as part of the greenhouse gas emissions work that's going on, I mean, certainly the issue and the question of development and development review and what role development and redevelopment activities play in the community's greenhouse gas emissions certainly is going to be part of the work that, the consultant's going to be taking into consideration. And so obviously it's another thing that's a worthwhile discussion matter with Kevin as well. But Alma, the short answer is that it stands right now, none.
Okay, thank you. I would certainly recognize that as a gap, but again, I'm new, so I would say we would need to be probably, less, what did they say, dollar penny wise, dollar foolish. So, large impact is probably something that we might want to at least be able to identify and maybe do something about.
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt, but if you want to go ahead. Is it okay? I just was going to say, I do think that, I don't know, my personal thoughts are, I don't know what anyone else thinks, but maybe it would be beneficial to have somebody, as was suggested, to have someone like Matt come in and sort of begin some sort of conversation, because the gap, as I think you put it, is unlikely, to say the least, to sort of rectify itself. These things are kind of not going to be reconciled on their own. And I think that the best place to begin might just be a conversation that with the various people who are involved and see if there isn't a way to better integrate these processes. Because, yeah, I mean, obviously, I think it estimates something like 21, it's like 3,000 plus trips a day, which is like 21,000 plus trips per week generated from to and from the Amazon facility, with all these flex drivers coming and going on a daily basis. And so I do think, I personally, it's just my feeling, I guess, that it would be nice either for there to be more of an environmental consideration baked into the review process, as I think Charlie had suggested at one point when I was discussing it with him, or that we're sort of an intermediate stop that sort of gets to review these developments or issuances of permits and gets to at least have 2 cents, our 2 cents put in, our concerns expressed. So I don't know what anyone else thinks, but I thought it could be good to have someone like Matt and whoever else factors in to come and talk to us. I think that would be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about having him come to a meeting since come on board with the village. The next couple of months would be a good time, but after that, especially as we are working on the next plan, in our next sustainability plan wouldn't be enough to give the commission a role in developing decisions, and have to be somewhere else also, either in a comprehensive plan or even just in internal, what the planning department does if they want us to have a role. But I think we should make that more known to him.
That's the only thing I would caution.
Yeah, Lisa. What?
I would just caution, I've done plan reviews for 10 years. It's very time intensive.
Yeah, and
so,
I mean, we are not we're not in a position
We can't take it
to
all.
do
Right.
anything close to what staff does. And I think Andrew touched on it a little bit, that we could be a role, we could be there, that we just maybe highlight some, we're not a final step that you have to pass an environmental check, we have to pass our checkpoint. It's just maybe we come in earlier in the process to raise some issues, to highlight, well, what about these concerns? Maybe you didn't think about these, or maybe you did, but try to throw them under the rug. That's the Amazon side, maybe not the village. And we're just there to kind of raise awareness of some of these issues. I think given our role as non-full-time staff, would be more what we'd be capable of doing. I think it seems like we all think that the commission should have the commission, or if there's staff that's raising these concerns, then fine, but it doesn't sound like, at least from the staff report on the Amazon, this last Amazon one, that they're raising these concerns. So somebody should be raising some of these concerns, at least,
Yeah, right. I was going to say,
So if there's some kind of role for us, as small as it may be.
I was just about to say that, yeah, I mean, exactly, because I think at least even if we were an intermediate sort of stop for these things and we could raise these issues, I think at least we would have a more active role. I mean, I'm not, obviously, I'm not saying that trying to tell anyone how to do their job per se, but I mean, I think it would be nice for us to have more of a voice and explore what that could look like. And I think that could be one way.
Lisa?
Yeah, just a couple points. Max mentioned that we don't get informed about development, and I know some of you were just saying that maybe we should be, but I think the whole purpose of this plan, I'm holding up our sustainability plan, is that is the guidepost. Those are the guideposts for staff and for the trustees to make decisions. And air quality, the goal was reduce the production and release of air pollutants and greenhouse gases in the village. So when Matt says that, the sustainability plan lives in separate areas and they're siloed, I don't understand where does our sustainability plan live? I don't understand that. I thought the whole point of this, it's not just like the little rule about, you know, you can only water from this time during the day to this time in the day, that there's these high goals and, you know, there are objectives, and that every single decision, you know, it doesn't have to guide, you know, be the you know, black and white decision, but that every decision everyone in the village makes should be about sustainability. Should we leave the lights on? Should we turn them off? Well, one of our goals is to, you know, save electricity, like that sort of thing. So I just want to say I was really disheartened to hear that, you know, that sustainability lives in a separate area. And it really, having been doing this for 5 years or 6 or 7 years, more than 5 years, made me really sad. And I really feel like I don't understand what this plan was about. And I don't know what we're supposed to have in the next plan if this doesn't guide people's decisions. So I'm really sad. So I don't know where we go from here, except maybe have a conversation with Matt, or maybe the village manager, or maybe the mayor, or maybe everybody. I'm just confused about what the plan was for, if that makes any sense.
Can I respond to this? And it sort of piggybacks on some of the conversation around reviewing plans. Would that be okay? Okay. So, I mean, I think one of the things about, you know, this commission reviewing plans is that we're going to have to do so in the context of like what's written into the zoning and development code, right? And I think this is something that Max was talking about, right? That even zoning and development, even if they want to be able to force Amazon to do this, you know, this or that or whatever, a lot of that has to live within the code, and they have to be able to have, you know, infrastructure within village code to be able to say, okay, well, this is what we're doing, and we're doing it because we want to address sustainability within the village. And so, Lisa, I understand that you're, I understand that you're disheartened, and I understand that it's disheartening to hear that this is siloed. But I think one way to sort of bring this back together is to, you know, take things like sustainability and look at where we can infuse them, and write that language in so that community development does have the structure and the framework to be able to say, okay, well, if you're going to do this, these are the steps that you need to take. Because ultimately, even if we do review plans, and even if we do say, okay, well, you know, this Amazon structure is not meeting the environment for, you know, the environmental like impact for all these reasons, the village is not held to requiring Amazon to do anything about that if it's not in the code, if it's not something that there is structure and framework for.
But yeah, I mean, that's sort of what you're saying is kind of what I'm getting at too. Ultimately, I mean, I think like I keep saying, it would be nice for us to have more of an active role, even if it is just raising concerns that we have about new development or permits that have come up. But the other thing is, yeah, I mean, I think that the step one to sort of making these changes in village code might be to just begin to have the dialogue with the relevant staff and sort of contemplate you know, making those changes. So, I mean, it would be nice to bring in whoever we need to have these conversations and to begin to make those necessary changes so that we can, going forward, I think, operate in a more environmentally, not that we haven't, I think we've made great strides in the past. I've been on the commission for 10 years. I think there are some significant strides that have been made, and through the diligent efforts of village, you know, the mayor, the village board, village staff. But I think there's more that can be done. And so it would be nice to have these conversations to bring people in and to begin to hopefully make those changes. I don't know what anyone else thinks.
Yeah, I think the idea of the commission reviewing development projects would be a very intensive step. But I also think having some previous professional experience and also personal experience dealing with development processes in different municipalities, I think the review of the Amazon was alarmingly superficial. And not just environmental, but also physical impact. There was a lot of stuff. It's almost like it just kind of breezed on through. And this is a major development project, and it really, to Lisa's point, it was very disheartening to have something like this and to have to read the planning commission's report where they just said they considered it, but just it was almost like a complete blow off, and it was like there really wasn't a level of due diligence that a project like that in Skokie really merits. I'm also, and I think what that calls for us to do is when we develop the next sustainability plan, as other communities are doing, is having very tangible goals, and to start looking at the family's point, some of the code and the building code and the zoning ordinances, and really take a look at those and see how sustainability initiatives would be baked into that. I think there are a lot of things, there's a lot of precedent in other municipalities around the country that are introducing more updated ways of doing things. Comprehensive plan for Skokie was released in 2003. It means it's dealing with data that's over almost 20 years old at this point, which effectively means we really don't have a comprehensive plan. A lot of these decisions are ad hoc. There are a lot of zoning requests that go before the zoning commission or zoning board of review because the zoning ordinance is onerous and it inhibits things. I think you could probably find some common themes there where there could be some revision to the zoning ordinance and streamline the process and make it more effective. There's a lot that can be done to improve this review process. I don't think it necessarily needs for us to, and I certainly, having just done something like a remodeling of the house, I think I had to go to the zoning board of appeals, I had to go to the parents commission. There's a number of things that need to be done. That was just, doing stuff on my house. I don't want to put people who are looking to make investments in Skokie to put them through. I don't want to reassign a review process just to make them jump through hoops. But I do think there's a lot we can do to make the process a lot more relevant and meaningful for what's going on today.
I think given the time, we're gonna move. Move for adjournment, but this is definitely something that we will continue talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the next item is adjournment. Do we have a motion? All right.
We're just doing the 28th. Shit, I'm sure it's in the middle of September.
Jenny, the next meeting does not conflict with holidays.
Oh, no, probably.
Gotta reschedule a house.
I just wanted to say, if you're going to the Backlot Bash, I wrote the theme song and I was gonna do it live at the library, and the library's not gonna be used this year. So they're gonna play a recording that the library is from the audio of the library, put it up. We did it in the studio the first year, and they're gonna play it at 4:00 on Saturday. It's gonna be me singing if you go see it on the main stage. I won't be there, but the recording will be there.
Okay, so.
Thank you, Liz, for helping that out.
You're welcome, Rick.
The 28th is the last day of holiday. Of a holiday. But yeah, it's some flights around. The week before is Sukkot. Can we do a Wednesday? Otherwise, we're into October, or the 4th of December, which is only a couple
I'm fine with Wednesday.
They're really a major holiday.
I am good with a Wednesday or the 14th, whichever you want to do.
I can do it.
Okay. 29.
Okay. Thanks for the help with the bike routes.
No, that was good. Let me just end the meeting real quick.
Did you decide on a day? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Okay, so
29.
it's going to be Wednesday, September 29th to accommodate for the holiday.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.